Now in the River Valley, where we're learning the Tyson plant in Van Buren has closed a day earlier than expected.
A Tyson's food processing plant now in Indiana, we've learned today, is set to close next year. This is all part of an effort there to cut costs.
The silence inside America's heartland is deafening. Conveyor belts once humming with life now sit motionless. Factory lights flicker out one by one. In towns that depended on a single employer, paychecks are gone and futures are uncertain. Tyson Foods, one of the largest meat producers in the United States, is closing plants across multiple states. Thousands of Americans are suddenly out of work, and behind the headlines lies a deeper story, one about tariffs, trade wars, and how political decisions made in Washington are shaking the very core of rural America. It began as a promise to make America stronger, to bring back jobs, protect industries, and stand up to foreign competition. But as the dust settles, the results look far more complicated. And painful Trump's aggressive trade policies, once sold as a way to defend U.S. workers, are now being blamed for crippling the very sectors they were meant to save. Tyson's plant closures didn't come out of nowhere. The company has been struggling with rising costs for months. Higher feed prices, labor shortages, and collapsing export markets. But at the center of it all, the return of tariffs has struck a heavy blow. New trade barriers on imported goods and retaliatory tariffs from China, Mexico, and other countries have made it harder for Tyson to sell American meat abroad. Demand has weakened, profits have dropped, and small-town plants that once fueled local economies are shutting their doors. In early 2025, Tyson announced the closure of multiple processing facilities, including plants in Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, and Arkansas. Each closure means hundreds, sometimes over 1,000, local jobs lost. For a small Midwestern town, that's not just an economic hit. It's an emotional one. It means fewer customers at diners, quieter grocery stores, and for many families, a desperate search for new work in communities where jobs have already been disappearing for years. For decades, Tyson was a symbol of stability in the rural Midwest and South. It employed tens of thousands of Americans and provided steady income in places where factory jobs had long vanished. But now, the company finds itself at the intersection of global forces it can't control. Trade policies that were supposed to make American products more competitive have instead sparked retaliation from major export markets. China, for instance, has imposed new tariffs on U.S. agricultural goods, including pork and poultry, in response to Washington's broader trade restrictions. These counter tariffs have made American meat less affordable overseas, slashing sales in key markets where Tyson once thrived. At the same time, the cost of doing business inside the United States is climbing. Tariffs on imported steel, aluminum, packaging materials, and equipment mean higher prices for everything Tyson needs to operate. Even feed costs have surged, as trade disruptions affect corn and soybean markets. When those costs rise, companies face two choices: raise prices for consumers or cut expenses somewhere else. Tyson chose the latter, closing plants and consolidating operations. And so, a policy meant to defend the American worker is, in practice, leaving thousands without work. In towns like Noel, Missouri, and Perry, Iowa, the closures hit hard. These aren't places with diversified economies or tech jobs waiting around the corner. For many families, Tyson was the only major employer. Generations worked in the same plant. Fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters, tied to the company by decades of loyalty and the shared belief that hard work guaranteed stability. Now, those same families are facing unemployment lines and uncertain futures. Local officials are scrambling to respond. Some towns are offering tax breaks to lure new employers. Others are pleading for federal support. But the truth is harsh. When a giant like Tyson pulls out, it takes years, sometimes decades, for small communities to recover. The loss ripples through every part of town. From housing markets to local schools, from small businesses to church donations. Meanwhile, political reactions have been divided. Trump's supporters argue that short-term pain is necessary to rebuild long-term independence, that America must endure the cost of decoupling from China and other rivals to regain control over its own economy. But critics counter that these tariffs are blunt instruments, punishing U.S. producers while competitors in Brazil, Argentina, and Europe swoop in to fill the gap. In the global meat trade, markets don't wait for politics to stabilize. When U.S. exports fall, buyers shift to other suppliers, and once those contracts are signed, they're rarely reversed. That means even if tariffs are lifted later, American farmers and processors may find themselves permanently sidelined. Canada, too, is watching closely. The Canadian meat industry has quietly benefited from the disruption south of the border. With fewer U.S. exports flooding global markets, Canadian producers have found new room to grow. Some Canadian plants are even expanding capacity to meet international demand, a mirror image of what's happening in the American Midwest. It's a striking example of how trade wars rarely produce winners, only those who adapt faster. Economists warn that the ripple effects of Tyson's closures could go well beyond the meat industry. When large employers downsize, nearby suppliers, logistics firms, and service providers also take a hit. Trucking companies lose contracts. Packaging plants lose orders. Even local farms, which supplied Tyson's facilities, now face shrinking demand. It's a domino effect that doesn't make headlines but quietly drains the life out of rural economies. Inside Washington, the debate over tariffs is growing louder. Supporters within Trump's circle argue that these policies are essential to protect American sovereignty and rebuild domestic capacity. They say short-term job losses are the price of independence. But across the aisle, lawmakers and economists warn that this strategy is self-defeating, that by isolating the U.S. from global trade, it risks shrinking the very industries it seeks to protect. For many Americans, the debate feels painfully abstract compared to the reality on the ground. In places like Van Buren, Arkansas, or Joslin, Illinois, there's no geopolitical calculation, just empty streets where factory buses used to run and families wondering how to pay their bills. And the frustration runs deep. Workers who once supported protectionist trade policies are now questioning whether those promises were ever meant for them. Some say they still back the idea of American-made, but not at the expense of their livelihoods. Others feel abandoned, trapped between global politics they don't control and local economies that can't survive without steady industry. Tyson's executives have been careful in their public statements. They've blamed market conditions, inflation, and shifting consumer habits. But industry insiders quietly point to trade policy as a key trigger, the factor that tipped a struggling sector into full-blown crisis. In an economy where every link in the supply chain depends on international movement, tariffs can create shockwaves that few anticipate. When you tax imports, prices rise. When partners retaliate, exports fall. The result is a tightening squeeze that leaves companies like Tyson with nowhere to turn. The deeper irony is that while the U.S. government seeks to punish foreign competitors like China, it's American farmers, processors, and consumers who end up absorbing most of the cost. China, meanwhile, has redirected its food imports toward South America, building stronger trade ties with countries that now see opportunity where America sees loss. This shift in global trade flows is more than economic. It's strategic. Every time the U.S. steps back from a market, someone else steps in. And as America's food exports decline, so does its influence abroad. For workers in the Heartland, though, the issue isn't geopolitics, it's survival. Some have been forced to relocate, others to take lower-paying jobs in retail or gig work. For those who've spent decades in food processing, starting over isn't easy. Their skills don't always transfer, and their towns can't offer new industries overnight. The human toll of these closures can't be measured in stock prices or GDP figures. It's found in the stories of families who once felt secure and now find themselves scraping by. It's seen in shuttered diners where workers used to gather after shifts, and in the local schools now facing budget cuts as tax revenues shrink. The crisis unfolding at Tyson is part of a larger reckoning, one that questions whether economic nationalism can truly deliver prosperity in a world built on interconnected trade. For decades, America's strength came from its ability to lead global markets. Now, in trying to wall itself off, it's discovering how deeply those markets are tied to its own well-being. The story isn't finished. Some plants may reopen under new models or automation systems. Some communities may find new investors or government relief. But the message is unmistakable. Tariffs and trade wars have consequences far beyond the headlines. They ripple through homes, towns, and futures. And that's the reality. A policy meant to protect American jobs ends up closing American factories. As the lights go out in towns across the Heartland, one truth remains. When trade wars turn inward, it's ordinary people who pay the highest price.